My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad24, and today I am in Warsaw, Poland, with the former Prime Minister of Poland and the current leader of the ECR,
Mateusz Morawiecki!
MP Mateusz Morawiecki. You posted this 4 days ago on X. If Law and Justice wins the elections and returns to power, a special ministry for illegal immigration will be established. We will send back all engineers, quotation marks, within 72 hours, at the latest within a week or two. We will not allow the Germans to treat us in the same way as before. The ministry will have special powers. There will be clamour in Brussels and Berlin, but Poland will not pay the price for the stupidity of EU bureaucrats.
Right.
I just wanted to get you on camera reconfirming that when you return Law and Justice to power...
I am reconfirming this. I would do this within 72 hours, and I tell you why.
Mateusz, such a joy to see you. It's been a while. The last time I saw you, you were actually Prime Minister still.
Oh, no, I think that we saw each other a couple of
we did bump,
months
actually,
ago
we did bump into each other before.
In the meantime, but yeah, lots has happened since then. Yeah.
What does it feel like to go from being the Prime Minister of a country, and Poland is now a top 20 economy of the world. It's the fifth largest economy in Europe.
I'm very proud
you were
of
the
it.
Prime Minister of you were the Prime Minister of
Yeah.
a very serious country, of a rising power in Europe. How does it feel to go from leading a country like this to suddenly being one of the leaders of the opposition?
Well, it's a completely different role, but given the fact that I'm also president of ECR, as you've mentioned, that's a mixed role, I would say. In Poland, I'm in opposition, and in the European Parliament, ECR is also in the opposition, but more and more often, we are part of the coalition with EPP and Patriots of Europe, forming a coalition of common sense. And this commonsensical coalition is trying to actually overvote the socialists, the renews, the communists, the greens, the leftists, and so on, the liberal leftist coalitions. And we managed to do this quite often. So that's also, to my satisfaction, quite a good piece of work in Europe. In Europe, you know this no less than I, that the pendulum is swinging to the right all over Europe, basically. And in Poland, lots to do as well. As you know, we are just the presidential campaign, a very successful campaign. My candidate, Karol Nawrocki, won just 1 month ago. And this is a very new situation in Poland. We will most likely, in several months or quarters or years, go back to power because the current ruling coalition is underperforming, to say the least.
As you know, I'm half Polish. I grew up in the UK. When I was growing up in the 90s and then early 2000s, there was a massive wave, especially in 2004, of Polish migrants from Poland to the United Kingdom.
Unfortunately, I know this, yeah.
We had a reputation as being a poor country of plumbers, of cleaners. It was actually almost a derogatory word. In the US, you still have the jokes about the dumb Polacks. I mean, there is a sort of reputationally a lingering remainer of an old image of Poland that I believe is absolutely no longer true. Explain to me how Poland went in 2004 to 2 million young people deciding there was no future for them here, leaving for the UK, for France, for the US, to now being the economy that it is and the country that it is. Could you walk us through that transformation?
Absolutely. During the 5-6 years while I was Prime Minister, for the first time in Polish history, 500,000 people from abroad, from the United Kingdom in particular, from Ireland, from Germany, from France, returned back to Poland. This happened for the first time in 200 years, that many more people came back to Poland than migrated out of Poland. So that's quite an achievement, which is a proof of success of Poland. We were macroeconomically stable and balanced. That was a very important factor. But the prerequisite for our economic success was what we've done in the first place when I started to be Minister for Finance and with Prime Minister Beata Szydło. What we've done back then, we have repaired the Polish budget. And all of a sudden, incredible amount of money from which previously leaked to VAT mafias, VAT carousel frauds, tax havens, CIT, corporate income tax not paid by multinationals and so on. All of a sudden, all this money is now landing in the Polish budget. So you can imagine with this money, we could not only spend more on social policy, on the welfare state, but also we've invested a lot in Polish municipalities, in Polish counties, which we call powiats and gminas. And this created a very solidarity type of environment when many people started doing their businesses. And in this kind of Schumpeterian melting pot, lots of good things happened because Poland had the strongest GDP growth over the last decade compared to the EU countries, and only comparable to Turkey, which is not part of the EU and doesn't have all those obstacles, red tape and so on. So quite a successful business model and operational model starting, this is this prerequisite which I spoke about, with repairing the budget and then investing this money appropriately and wisely in infrastructure, in new businesses, in venture capital. This all created a very good ecosystem for business. This is why so many businesses from abroad started in Poland, including Google, Microsoft, LG, Mercedes-Benz, Toyota increased their business here and so on. And this is why the unemployment level, where in Poland, can you imagine, in Poland just 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was one of the highest in the European Union. At the end of my term, it was the lowest or the second lowest in the European Union. Poland and Czech Republic was number one, number two, changing month by month. So that's an incredible combination of different macroeconomic policies, and this policy mix proved to be so successful.
And you can really see it on the streets. I mean, when you walk around Warsaw, Warsaw really has become one of the, I would say, one of the nicest cities to live in Europe.
Go to the Polish
and I was about to say,
yeah.
I was about to say next that it isn't just the capital city; it is also the countryside, which has become.
Go to Krosno, go to Koszalin, Suwałki, other regions. You will see beautiful cities, clean streets, safe streets. People are not fearful of going, of walking with their little kids. We are one of the safest countries in Europe and in the world.
Why do you think that is?
Because we've invested a lot in security, because we were able to fend off this madness which Angela Merkel started with her Willkommenskultur. You might recall her famous Wir schaffen das, which means we
yes,
will.
We can.
Yes, we can.
We will
which
manage.
Means we will manage to take
manage.
yet another million and yet another million of illegal migrants, and even if they don't behave, we will do this good for because this enriches our culture. We will do this for all the other countries. Now the situation changed completely. The pictures from the cities all over Europe, in Madrid, in Paris, Marseille, but also up in the north, Stockholm, Göteborg, Malmö, are really terrible. And the amount of crime there, the rate of rapes and assaults and sexual assaults and so on, it's incredibly high. I've heard about the scandal in the United Kingdom about the
Pakistani grooming gang scandal.
Yes, yeah, I've heard about this, and that's terrible. We don't want this in Poland. This is why this was my decision to build this wall on the Polish-Belarusian border. Right now, we are aware of this, what is happening on Polish-German border, the citizen border controls. You might have heard about them.
Just explain for our viewers, which remember our viewers are not Polish. Explain to us the Belarusian border crisis. Tell us what happened and why you decided to build a massive wall. And it's a massive wall, I've seen it.
This was absolutely, this was 5.5 meters tall, 18 feet or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And this started in 2021
Sure.
when Lukashenko and Putin, because this was part of the hybrid war against Europe, right after Afghanistan, withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan. So probably this was also one other step in the mind of the Kremlin, in the mind of Vladimir Putin, how we make the West how we ridicule the West, how we make a mockery out of West, and Poland being on the road between Belarus and Russia to Germany and France had to be kind of destroyed. And this is why they started to instrumentalize migrants. They took them artificially. They invited them to Belarus, which is not exactly
they
the tourist.
flew them in.
Absolutely.
They had flights
Yes, this was
chartered
the
from
case,
Iraq, Yemen, and a few other places.
And Northern Africa,
Sure.
Tunisia, Libya, and so on. They flew them in Belarus, and as you can imagine, Belarus is not exactly the main tourist destination for Iraqi or Libyan citizens. So they all went into Belarus. They were took physically to the Belarusian-Polish border, and they started pushing them through our border. Our border guards started seeing this, and they were very, professional in defending Polish border. But we knew that with tens of thousands, Stefan, and within a very short period of time.
Sure.
And they started pushing them to Poland and through Lithuania and Latvia as well, because Belarus borders also with Latvia and Lithuania. And this is why we had to stop it, and within a very short period of time, we were able to build this very tall wall, which proved to be very successful physical barrier.
But before you built the wall, and I think this is a very important aspect of this story, there were the images, of course, of 2015 and the
Yes.
broad crisis. Small boats arriving. The small boats are still going across from France to the United Kingdom. They're still going to the Canary Islands. They're still going across the Strait, Lampedusa, etc., etc., etc. Poland, the images coming out from the Polish eastern border, the Polish-Belarus border, were very different to the images coming out of Greece, right? Can you tell us what happened, how the Polish state, before they managed, because it took a bit of time to build the wall. The wall didn't miraculously
5-6
go
months.
Up. Sure.
We've done this very quickly.
In that space of time, you sent the army.
I've sent the army because the Polish border guards is 15,000 of those. So we had to support them with the Polish army dispatched along the Polish-Belarusian border. And they were very quickly able to establish a provisional physical barriers, the wire,
Sure.
and some other stuff. And they started fighting with those who tried to illegally enter the territory of the Republic of Poland. And even this, within this period of time, we were able to stop this wave of migrants going through Poland, basically to Germany, to France. So we saved Germany from tens of thousands. Or hundreds of thousands.
Sure.
Had we not been able to do such a physical barrier, I'm sure this would have been
a bigger crisis.
Hundreds of thousands, Stefan, not tens of thousands of people. So the Germans should thank us for what we've done in 2021, 2022, and then 2023. But of course, in the meantime, there was a Russian attack on Ukraine. And this is why we had to refocus our attention on Ukraine. But the wall was already built by that time, and the border was well secured.
What was the response when you put up the wall, and when you sent the army, and then when you put up the wall? What was the response from the European left? Do you remember what the articles were saying, what the headlines were saying?
I was Prime Minister back then, and I remember that during the European Council meeting, there was not much understanding, to say the least, for Poland defending this border, even if after several weeks or months, I was able to persuade Ursula von der Leyen and some other colleagues that this is a real hybrid war against Poland.
So they didn't believe that it was.
They didn't believe it. They didn't want to contribute. We've built this with our own Polish money, so we didn't receive any euro for saving Europe from the east. Zero, this was all
because
done
it wasn't just an attack on Poland. It was a hybrid warfare attack against NATO, against the European Union.
95% or 99%, but let's be conservative, being conservative. 95% would go to Germany, to Austria, to Belgium, to Holland, to the Netherlands, or to France. This was their aim. Because people are people, they want better life. They were instrumentalized by Lukashenko, by Putin, but they wanted to go to Germany. So with this wall, with Polish money, we saved Germany even a bigger problem than they have
and they already
today.
Have.
And they want to offload this problem today on Poland because many migrants who came from through the Mediterranean Sea. Like for instance, yesterday, I was at the Polish-German border, and people were telling me about Algerian migrants. So can you imagine Algerians coming through Belarus? Very difficult.
Because the EU mechanism
to France, to Germany.
Of course, the EU mechanism, the Dublin regulation, works in such a way that anyone who enters EU territory has to declare themselves an asylum seeker in the first safe country. In 2015, Merkel bypassed the regulation and said, welcome everyone.
Come to Germany.
You can come to Germany, you can process your claim, your asylum claim in Germany.
Exactly.
And now they've changed their mind, right? So now they're saying, well, we respect the Dublin regulation again. If you've arrived in Germany, we will send you back to whatever border country, whatever EU border country you came via.
The Germans respect the Dublin regulation when it suits them. Initially, for a number of years, they were not recognizing the Dublin regulation, not at all. Right now, given the problem which they have, there are more and more of those, crimes by the illegal migrants in Germany, and AfD is, stronger and stronger, and this is why they now want to push those illegal migrants through the German-Polish border. Even I revert back to my example. Even Algerians. It's very low likelihood that any Algerian came via Tunisia and Libya and Egypt and Greece, and then to Turkey and then to Ukraine, to Belarus and then to Poland and then to Germany.
It's highly unlikely.
They probably went through the normal route for all the Algerians, through France, to Germany, and through Germany they were caught by whatever services, by police, German police, and German police is bringing all those illegal migrants to one place, to many places, but one very famous is in Eisenhüttenstadt, next to the Polish-German border, and out of this place, they are dispatching them. They are pushing them actually through German-Polish border. This is why there are citizens' border controls. This is why we, the Law and Justice, my political camp, strongly opposes to this German policy. We don't want to be the victims of the German mistakes of Angela Merkel policy, of Olaf Scholz policy.
Sure.
Now recently, of course, Friedrich Merz is only for the last 2 months the Chancellor of Germany, but he now tries to offload this problem, and he now wants to push those migrants into Poland.
I want to circle back to what you were saying slightly earlier about how safe Poland is. Explain, what do you think the factors are that make Poland so safe? Why do you think comparatively, do you think that the presence of a large number of legal and illegal, or are you just talking about illegal migrants, makes a country less safe? Because many of the migrants in, say, Sweden, for example, there was a wave of migrants, for example, from the Balkans, people who fled after the collapse of Yugoslavia, and much of the grenade violence.
That's correct, yeah.
Much of the grenade violence. So, for example, there was an insane statistic from Sweden that says that there is, on a weekly basis, 1 grenade attack, which is mind-blowing if you think about a peaceful country.
But that's the case. Yeah.
Most of those are either second or third generation relatives of people who fled during the dissolution of Yugoslavia, right? And they brought back the violence from the Yugoslav war, and it's now intermingled in gang violence, etc., etc., etc. But these people came to Sweden at the time legally, right? So what I'm asking is, what is a sensible migration policy if you were to be prime minister again? And I wish that for you.
Thank you.
What will a sensible migration policy for Poland look like?
Well, like, first of all, we have huge demographic problems across Europe and also in Poland. This is why there are seasonal workers, migrant workers, working in Poland for 3 months, gathering stuff on during the crops, during the harvest, working in some types of sectors where no Poles want to work anymore.
Fair enough.
Because of the economic growth, because of the salary growth in Poland, and so on. And have you seen any issues with those migrant workers during the era when I was prime minister? No, because they were a completely different category, people coming from Philippines or from Belarus or from Ukraine predominantly, or from Vietnam, and they behaved very well because they had no access to security system, no access to healthcare system, to educational system. They were just seasonal workers for a couple of months. That's a completely different from distributing across all the member states of the European Union, including Poland, all the illegal migrants, millions of them, who are in Europe and who don't want to work, who want to have access to a social benefit system, to your welfare state, who want to have access to the healthcare system, which is always very expensive. And this is why the Polish citizens, through such an access, would be in a worse situation, which I disagreed with. This is why in 2018, in June, you can check it, in the conclusions of the European Council, the Visegrad countries, Prime Minister Andrej Babiš from the Czech Republic, Pellegrini from Slovakia, Orban from Hungary, and myself, we have blocked the madness of illegal migration and quotas of illegal migrants being distributed across Europe back then. And I have a kind of déjà vu, because the Migration Pact was in force in 2015, 2016, 2017. Then it was blocked by my government, and successfully so. And when it took only 1 week for my successor, Prime Minister Tusk, to de facto agree on a renewed Migration Pact in December, 22nd of December or 23rd of December 2023. So 1 week after he took over from me the baton of prime ministers. And since then, we have increasing problems because my successor is not able to deal decisively enough with this issue. What I mean by this, he should have been talking to the Chancellor Scholz and now Chancellor Merz, saying that he's not allowing for any illegal migration being pushed by the German-Polish border. We don't believe that these guys came through Poland because the Polish eastern border is secure enough, and also our southern borders are not the borders with the third countries, are the borders with member state countries, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and with Lithuania up in the north. So we have arguments, we have good points to make with the Germans, not to accept the thousands or tens of thousands right now of illegal migrants, which are going to drain our budget, which are going to decrease the security, the safe streets in our country. And these type of migrants who do not behave appropriately, they are also a kind of attack on our identity, national identity. They are coming from Muslim countries. They are changing completely the landscape, the cultural landscape. Even recently, there was a case in Poland, in Skierniewice, where some illegal migrants pushed from Germany were taken by Polish services, border guards, and were taken to the orphanage in Skierniewice. And well, they were most likely much older than 18 years old, and they started to impose Islamic rules on children in this orphanage. Now, don't laugh on this. It's insane. It's insane.
It's insane.
But that's the case. You can read about this in many sources across Poland. So that's happening, even if you have such a tiny illegal migration. And we want to be wiser than our partners from the West. And this is why my tough policy against illegal migrants.
With legal migration, and I really want to ask you about this in the perspective of you becoming prime minister again. The legal migrants that will be allowed into Poland, will there be a pathway to citizenship for them? I have a strong belief from my experiences of living in Western Europe, of growing up in the UK, of growing up in France partially, in spending most of my life in Western Europe, that even with legal migration and the inevitable pathway to citizenship, you end up with voting blocs that go against the interests of your country. What I mean by this very specifically is, for example, the 5 Gaza independents, so-called Gaza independents. These are 5 members of parliament in the United Kingdom who were essentially elected on sectarian lines. Their entire platform for their campaigns to the British Parliament, to the Houses of Commons, was Gaza. That was it, right? They were campaigning on Gaza and Gaza alone. 5 of them were elected to the House of Commons. Which is insane, that there is a sufficiently large voting bloc in certain constituencies of people with British passports or their descendants saying, my biggest issue right now is Gaza. Not the fact that my community needs investment, not the fact that we want the British NHS system to function better, not that we want better schooling for our children. No, we want to elect you based on Gaza and Gaza alone. And so I'm incredibly concerned that if we... And I understand that there is a labour shortage in Poland. Fair enough. Is it possible to implement something along the lines of a UAE model, for example, where you can bring vast amounts of workers but impose strict enough rules to ensure that those people behave in accordance with the law of the land, and to not provide them with a pathway to citizenship?
Absolutely. We have done this during the rule of the law and justice. When I was prime minister and before that a deputy prime minister, this was the policy which we would have implemented. There was a huge shortage of labor force and brains, but in particular labor force for agricultural sector, for some manufacturing sector.
Sure.
They went back and they are now back in Philippines, in Vietnam, and in particular a group of migrant workers from Belarus. I can tell you they are very close to the Polish citizens
culturally.
from culturally.
And in many ways ethnically as well, actually.
And ethnic as well, but well, absolutely, if they want to stay, absolutely,
sure.
And the language and so on. But if
Sure.
they want to stay as Belarusian, they stay as Belarusians. No problem with that. But culturally, they are very close, and they don't make any troubles. They don't make any crimes. More than Poles or average stats is not showing anything like that. And they are diligent workers. They look for jobs. They are assimilating with the Polish society very quickly. So are some Ukrainian. It's always some part of the Ukrainian population, not all of them, because some is behaving differently. But even people from countries like Philippines, who are Catholics, basically Christians, they are completely different from illegal migrants from Middle East or from Northern Africa or from Africa. This is why I make a very strong differentiation between this group of people who is coming for 6 months or 12 months and is reverting back to their home countries, or illegal migrants being pushed by the European Union, European Commission, and we have to keep them in our country forever, and then they take their families from the Middle East, from Muslim countries, and this culture is not assimilating. We see this lesson across Europe. In France, we see what all those Islamic subcultural circles are doing, and we don't want it in Poland. There are citizens' border controls along the Polish-German border. Why is that? Because this current government, my successors, are not stepping up to the role which they now are facing, and they are not putting appropriate controls and appropriate agreements with the Germans, with the German government, on the Polish-German border. This is why citizens took this very task in their hands, which is quite a phenomenon across Europe, I would say.
It is a phenomenon, and the videos of it are really quite interesting to watch, because you have a sense of, I think one interesting point, actually, just to bounce back on what you're saying, is when I think about France or Germany or the UK, especially after a terror attack happens. So, for example, after the Bataclan or after the Nice, lorry, or the random stabbings in Germany, or the Southport stabbing by Axel Rudabakana recently in the UK, the response is usually an outpouring of sort of hopes and prayers online, and nothing. And here, the moment that Poles felt that their identity and their country was at risk, citizens came out. There was actually something quite moving about the fact that these men, feeling the danger, walked out. And I think also the very interesting response was when we had the really tragic story of the murder of Claudia by an irregular Venezuelan. I mean, this is one of the worst stories. Absolutely horrific. Being stabbed in the eyes so that she can't recognize her assailant, spending 2 weeks in agony in hospital before dying. But the response was immediate. It was these men in Toruń, mostly men, because it really is mostly these very manly Slavic types going out and sort of saying, we won't accept this, we won't have this. I think there is and this is sort of leads us on, it's a good segue into what I was going to ask you next. What does it mean to be Polish? What does Poland mean to you?
It means not only respect for the past, respect for our culture, for our history, for Christianity, but also we are a very proud nation with with great history, but we also want to have great future. This is why I'd say that being a proud Polish citizen, I want Poland to thrive, and I want Poland to be among the best in terms of technology development, modernization of our country, being one of the most competitive countries, productive countries. By the way, productivity grew at double the pace than in Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, or Slovakia during the time when I was prime minister. The macroeconomic policy and economic policy in Poland worked very well, and the proof is in the productivity, which is this very critically important factor, macroeconomic variable. So we have to modernize our economy, keeping our values. We have to have a strong, unified nation based on our Polish culture, Christian culture, while at the same time, we need to be open for trade, for competition, because this is how the world works today. Being close and bringing building walls against the competition does not work, because this is the way path to no way. Venezuela, Belarus, or North Korea shows what such a model means. So those two wings or lungs, if I may say so, the conservative lung and this lung concentrating on the future. This is the program of my political camp in a nutshell.
One of the great successes of Poland, and not just during your government, but since the fall of communism, between 1994 and all the way with a brief pause during COVID, there was uninterrupted economic growth. I believe on average of 3.4% of GDP year on year of growth, which is an insane statistic. Poland didn't go through a crisis in 2008 when the vast majority of Europe was going through a recession. There's been year on year economic growth. You can see it with, just the skyline of Warsaw, right? You land in Warsaw and there's this massive skyline. It wasn't there 30 years ago.
Who owns them, Stefan?
I don't know, you tell me.
The foreign companies and foreign funds. This very success since 1989 was not such a success as I would have wished for, because it was through selling off the most of our industry, most of our businesses to the foreign owners. This is why more than 50% of Polish economy today is in the hands of foreigners. Completely different ratio than in Germany, Japan, France, or the Netherlands.
What is that ratio? What's the ratio in those other countries?
Around 20%, but also that's one thing. That's one thing, but also the businesses and funds from those very countries, from Japan and from Germany and from the States, own a lot of businesses abroad. So not only the ownership of the pure ownership of the businesses is on a lower level, but people from those very countries own businesses abroad. So it's very much equalized and balanced. In Poland, this is not the case. Given the model which was started in 1989, we are now sending off net 140 billion zlotys, which is approximately 30 to 40 billion dollars every year net abroad. Why is that? Because those guys who started businesses here, who took over businesses in Poland, they have a steady dividend flow on those businesses, on the banks, insurance companies, groceries, FMCG business, and all the other sectors. This was a huge mistake. So for 25 years, Poland grew predominantly because we were selling our assets. Not only this, of course, lots of Polish internal, bottom-up, Schumpeterian energy. This was also the case. Absolutely, this was a great success. But given the mistakes which we made in the first 2 decades after the transformation, we are now the victims of this model, and it will take us 30 to 40 years to repair this, because we have to support our companies to go abroad. We have to support our capital to go abroad, to repatriate capital from abroad. So sorry not to be so enthusiastic about your question, what happened in the 90s or in the noughties, but I tell you the model which was in Poland, the operational and business model.
Wasn't the kickstarting of the Polish economy after 45 years of command economy, didn't it just require a massive injection of cash that we in Poland didn't have? Isn't that a sort of chicken and egg problem?
Why was this not necessary in Korea, in Finland? Finland was also in a poor state, better than the communist countries. Why? But Korea was much, South Korea, of course, was much poorer than Poland.
Sure.
Taiwan, much poorer than Poland. Singapore, much poorer. And those countries were able to accumulate capital from within, and they are now the owners of their own economy. In Poland, we are only half owners of our own economy. Yes, the injection of know-how was important. I do agree with some tone of your question, Stefan. The world is not that simple, and we took a lot of competencies, technology with this capital. But tell me, what kind of special technology is there for the foreign owners buying the network of Polish groceries or a Polish bank? This is not a very sophisticated technology.
You're not wrong. It's not. You're right.
It's not. So you are half right, because sometimes this technology was extremely important, but sometimes the cases of taking over Polish assets were appalling, because they were taken for the market share, and the very factories and plants went bankrupt, and people were actually unemployed. And this lasted for decades.
Example, a good example of this is the destruction of Polish sugar refineries by German competition. I think is the classic example, right?
Absolutely, and cement and ABB and Elvro in Wrocław, my home city, and I can give you hundreds of such examples.
A counter argument. One of the main arguments of the proponents of the economic transformation that Poland underwent is that by selling the assets abroad, they prevented the oligarchization of Poland. Now, for example, you can take the example of Poland and Ukraine. Obviously, you're the economist. I really, this is not my field of expertise, but just from the little that I do understand and that I do know, Ukraine was comparatively wealthier than us in 1991.
On a similar level. Yeah.
On a similar level, perhaps a little bit higher because it's a larger country. Look at Ukraine now and look at Poland now. And I'm talking even before the Russian invasion, be it the full-scale invasion of 22 or even the 2014
yeah.
or the 2014 invasion. If you look at the development of Poland and you look at the development of Ukraine, what happens in Ukraine and what happens in Poland? Poland strips its assets. Its assets are stripped and unfairly so, as you argue, but they go abroad. No oligarchs in Poland. And I think it's a very important aspect of the Polish economy that we don't have a class of oligarchs the way many other post-communist countries do. Ukraine, I think one of their biggest issues was certainly corruption on one hand and a very strong oligarchization of the state. That you can't have a state run by oligarchs that becomes a liberal democracy the way Poland is.
Okay, now a counter-argument.
Sure.
Why do you think, Stefan, that Polish oligarchs are worse than the German oligarchs, French oligarchs, or the Dutch oligarchs?
I don't think we have oligarchs.
We have now people from abroad who are very rich, who own significant parts.
In that sense.
Absolutely.
In that sense,
and
I see.
They were also able to mess around. They are sticking their nose in the Polish businesses. And I'd rather have Polish oligarchs than the German oligarchs. That's first point. My second point is that the oligarchization, and you're right that too big oligarchs may be dangerous, but the richest Pole is 2 times or 3 times less rich than the richest Czech oligarch.
Sure.
So we have very rich Poles, but they are much less rich, less richer than their Czech or Hungarian or other counterparts. What it means that there was probably too little of accumulation of capital in Poland, and because of that, in this very hole, the foreign capital entered and took the best cherries on the cake from the Polish economy. This is my second argument, and my third argument is the following. Yes, in the 90s there was lots of crime, and some oligarchization started in a way than we wouldn't wish to have. And back then, you might recall, the Minister for Justice was Lech Kaczyński in the Jerzy Buzek government, and this was his government in the Ministry of Justice, which started fighting lots of crime, oligarch type of behavior in the Polish economy, and since then, we have much less issues and problems with oligarchs than many other countries across the European Union. So I heard about this argument which you've mentioned, but I disagree with most of this.
Would you say that there are foreign oligarchs that are meddling in Polish affairs? That's the owners of Poland's wealth. If you say 50% of Poland's wealth is owned by foreigners, are those foreigners interfering in Poland's internal affairs?
Yes, absolutely. Many of them supported, in particular, my political opponents, because my political opponents, Civic Platform in particular, wants the system to stay as it used to be, and we have changed it a lot. So, what was the plan to recover? How do you change that ratio of 50% ownership? How do you make the Poles wealthy? You can do this in 2 different ways. One is revolution, and we don't want a revolution because we know how bad any revolution can be. The other one is to make Poles richer and richer, and make Poland and Poland Inc., Polish economy, to be more and more competitive, because through this, Polish businessmen will be able to export more, and exports is a modus operandi how you repatriate capital, and growing your business domestically enables Polish businesses to acquire businesses abroad, to make mergers and acquisitions with businesses abroad, and they are still hunger for success, and many Polish mid-sized and bigger entrepreneurs, they go abroad and they started buying their Western European competitors. So this phenomenon already started, Stefan. But it takes decades. This is why I said it probably is going to take us 20, 30, 40 years until we will be able to equalize this very bad capital account, this capital outflow out of poorer Poland to richer Germany, Sweden, France, and the Netherlands, and so on.
There has been economic growth. Poles are definitely wealthier today than they were in 1989. We can agree on that. And yet, one of the things that has changed.
But please differentiate between the flow and the stock. Flow and stock, GDP growth and wealth accumulated per capita.
But Poles have accumulated more capital than they have. I think when I try to explain Poland to people...
Poles accumulated capital, you said? Average Pole has 10 times less accumulated capital per capita than average German. 6 times less than average Italian.
Okay, but the average Italian hasn't had 45 years of communism beforehand.
Absolutely.
Right? So the way I look at this in terms of trying to explain to my friends asking me why I decided to move from London, where I grew up, and I always say there's one sentence which I think encapsulates Poland, and it's, my generation in Poland will be better off than our parents and our grandparents. In the West, the reverse is true. Millennials and Gen Z are going to be worse off than their parents, and definitely worse off than their grandparents.
Yes.
Right? So there is a sense of great optimism, of hope, and this is finally where my question was going.
And this is finally where we probably will agree, because here I can only agree what you suggested.
That your children will be better off than you.
Yeah, they have a very good chance of being better off than my generation. My generation was better off than my parents.
Your generation is 100% better off than your parents.
Absolutely.
Why are birth rates falling? Why are Poland's demographics so bad, given that the economy is improving, it's a safe place, it's year on year things are better, and I generally think it's an optimistic place because we will be better off as a young generation than our parents' generation. Why are birth rates plummeting here?
That's a cultural phenomenon across the globe. What's the birth rate, fertility rate in Iran? Theocratical Islamic Republic of Iran, 1.75. What is it in Turkey? 1.8. So the rates are dropping everywhere. Only in some Central African countries, it's still around 4, but not 7 or 8 as it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. In Asia, only in Afghanistan, the poorest country, you have a rate of 4.5.
Wow.
In all other countries across the globe, even African countries.
There is an exception in the Western world. Israel is the exception.
I know, Orthodox and so on. But even then, it is changing. And it's very small country in terms of population.
Sure, of course.
But the rest of the world, and in Europe in particular, but not only in Europe, in China, even in India, it's 2.3 per woman fertility rate. So it's dropping dramatically across the globe because of cultural changes. And that's a wave, that's a phenomenon which we are not going to address with the factors which you've mentioned, like how rich you are or how stable the economy is, how safely you can walk on the streets and so on. It is a factor deciding about the standard of living and how what's your well-being, but this does not decide about if you want to have children or not.
So why, on a personal level, you have children. Your children are in their 20s, I believe.
Yeah. 20s, and I have 2 teenagers as well.
Of course. Why do you think their generation, and I'm obviously in my early 30s, why do you think people our age are not having children? Then what do you think has changed?
Well, like lots of media promote a different style of life. They promote consumption and individualism. They do not promote family values. They do not promote community values, which nation-related values. To defend your nation, you have to have also belief in your nation and believe in your country. And there is less and less of this. The liberal leftist propaganda, which is spreading across the Western civilization in particular, has created a completely different human being. People started to be less dedicated to their communities, to their families. And now they want the state to do everything for them, which is not possible because, the subsidiarity clause and subsidiarity rule and so on. These are the underlying reasons why the world is changing right now culturally so deeply.
On a personal level, are you optimistic about the future?
I'm cautiously optimistic because there were many crises throughout the history of humankind. And we were able to somehow get out of those traps and pitfalls and terrible circumstances in the past. But sometimes we were not able to avoid victims, many atrocities and many tragedies. And this is why we have to work and communicate very strongly with each other, with other politicians, with other partners from other countries, to work on those issues, because they are serious issues. We started our conversation with illegal migration. I just don't believe that Europe is in a position to absorb tens of millions of people. And in Africa, there is 1.4 billion people, and probably 99% of them would want to live in Europe. Is it possible to bring them here? No, completely. It's impossible. This is why we should actually promote economic cooperation for those countries to grow and for those people to stay in situ where they are today. That would be my policy, and this is why what I was very loud about, vocal about during the European Council meetings.
You spent years. You were Prime Minister for many years. You met many leaders. Who was the person you got along with the most on a personal level? Like, who was the funniest leader you met? Someone that sort of made you laugh.
When I say the funniest, it would probably be a little bit offending to this person, so I'm not gonna.
No, but the most amusing, like the one with the best sense of humor.
We got along very well with all the leaders of the Visegrad countries.
Sure.
So Viktor Orban, Andrej Babis, but even his successor, Petr Fiala,
sure.
Completely different character, but a very interesting kind of guy. Giorgia Meloni, but even you might be surprised now, Pedro Sanchez from Socialists,
sure.
Completely different than mine, socialist, leftist type of agenda. But on a personal level, he never attacked Poland on the European Council. He just defended the interests of his country as he believed it's right, and I'm not accusing him of doing so. The opposite is the case. I'm accusing my successor of not defending the interests of my country. But Giorgia Meloni is fantastic. Boris Johnson was very funny but very interesting kind of persona. Many conversations with him. On a personal level, I have very good, by and large, I have a good experience with those people. Many of them...
Even with the liberal sort of leftist establishment of the EU, I mean, Poland was in such a conflict under your leadership. There was the conflict between the Brussels elites and Warsaw was so strong. I mean, they really tried to derail your leadership at every step of the way, right? And you were still able to have good relations on a sort of interpersonal level?
Relatively good relationship, but I have not mentioned the leaders of France or Germany because they were in particularly involved in attacking my country, in attacking my political camp, my political party. And this is why we were very assertive and we were very strongly fighting for our interests. not for German interests and not for French interests. And they were not happy with this because they were used to to Polish governments which were not understanding how the economy works. My predecessors, for instance, and Poland was very able to play with. And when Beata Szydło was prime minister or I was prime minister, we were probably much more difficult partners. But it is a kind of compliment to me. If they were fighting with me, this means that I was defending the interests of my country. I'm not very happy if I read too good comments in foreign press on myself.
You went from so many years of being prime minister, and then that comes to an end. What do you miss most about being prime minister? Because you're an interesting case in Polish politics. Most politicians that we've had over the last 35 years since communism fell have been career politicians. You had a very successful career beforehand, which you could have gone back to. You didn't have
Absolutely,
to.
yeah.
I mean, you really are an example of someone who takes public duty seriously. You had a much better paying job that you left to become Minister of Finance.
20 times better.
20 times better. There we are. We've quantified it. And yet here you still are sitting in Parliament. What is it that keeps you sort of motivated? Why are you still here?
Because I want to have as much of influence on what is happening in my country and across Europe as possible. And being politician, you change reality around you. And this is what I want to continue. Now being in opposition, I'm also signaling all the failures and mistakes of the policy of my successors. And through this, they changed their policy. My successor, Prime Minister Tusk, today has taken over 80% of my policy. He's now a patriotic kind of guy. You laugh. I know why. He's patriotic kind of guy. Now marching along the wall, which I built on Polish-Belarusian border. Look at me, how patriotic I am. I'm laughing as well at it. But this is just one little tiny example how much of my policy, how many aspects of my policy he is now trying to realize, or at least he's pretending that he's going to realize in the future, but he is unable to do so because he never worked with economy. He doesn't understand economy. He doesn't understand public finances. He is now realizing the biggest, the highest, the deepest budget deficits. Every year he is growing budget deficit relative to GDP by 5 percentage points. It's the fastest pace over the recent decades, which worries me. And this is why I try to, maneuver between the rocks, and I try to indicate to the government, being part of the opposition, hey guys, you're going the wrong direction. Central communication hub has to be built. Polish ports have to be built as well. And without us pushing them, they would be realizing a completely different economic model, which they called, a kind of diffusion model. What's called it in English during the previous civic platform era, and I'm against it because this model didn't work. Then we changed it, and I don't want the government to revert back to the previous model. So even today, I feel quite influential in Poland, believe it or not.
You posted this 4 days ago on X. If Law and Justice wins the elections and returns to power, a special ministry for illegal immigration will be established. We will send back all engineers with quotation marks within 72 hours, at the latest within a week or two. We will not allow the Germans to treat us in the same way as before. The ministry will have special powers. There will be clamour in Brussels and Berlin, but Poland will not pay the price for the stupidity of EU bureaucrats.
Right.
I just wanted to get you on camera reconfirming that when you return Law and Justice to power.
I am reconfirming this. I would do this within 72 hours, and I tell you why. And this I brought also from my business era, execution. you have to be able to execute what you plan to do. Planning and making some legislation, some regulation is only one little part of making it happen. End to end, we call it in business. Do this from the beginning to the very end of the task. This was also one of the reasons of the success of my economic and policy and repairing public finances. And I would plan this in advance, and we would be ready to do this if the citizens of Poland decide again that we should be forming the government of the future. And this is why I'm so, upbeat about this. I'm so certain that this can happen, because I was able to prove that difficult things can happen. Like when COVID started, we were able within 2 weeks period, this was the fastest pace in Europe, to support hundreds of thousands of Polish businesses. You remember there was no demand, no supply, no liquidity across business, and we were able to basically rescue all of those businesses. And this is why Poland went through the COVID times on the first place as the best economy across not only the EU countries, but amongst the many countries around the globe. We have been able to act fast, decisively, take very quickly decision on this or that. Not taking decision is usually worse than taking even not optimal decision. This was my credo, and I would do the same once being back in power.
I wish you all the best, Mateusz.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.